Okay. Hello, everyone. I thought about giving a live stream today, and as a beginning note, my voice hasn't fully recovered, and I was under antibiotics, but the title of today's episode was very interesting. I thought I have to say something. So, just keep in mind my voice is still under recovery. Anyways, I thought about this idea of beyond the transcendental and beyond transcendental entrapment and the implication of that. You know, there's ideas from just like how people have lived in different times in our history. You can say ideas have emerged and opened up to the human subjective reality at different times. I wanted to speak about the notion that reality can be a dream, reality can be an illusion, and what does it mean that we are in a sort of trap of sensory perception, as the ancients would say. I divide it in a way when I think about life that I think about objects and subjects are moving. Objects move, subjects arise, and as the subjects move, we call that free will moving the object, as subjects move the object. So human beings can live as bodies that are projecting minds, or they can live as minds that project a sort of embodiment. That means a person thinks of getting a glass of water, the mind projects that in the inner realms, and then the body goes and gets a cup, a glass of water. So we have the possibility of objects first, then the subject becomes significant, or subjects first, then the object becomes significant. Becomes significant. In my own life, there was a time, I would say, in 2015, for a week, I had the experience that there was a parallel sense to the world, and in some sense, think of it as if a person not thinking that they have a sort of past life or future life, but a person thinking that the present is present, and there is various lines of time in a singular point, as if we draw a point and we're drawing different lines through it. That singular point is experiencing all realities at once, but through each line the realities separate. So there is one point in all reality that connects to all other realities in some sense. I felt for 1 week in 2015 that I had to, and this is really in the inner realms and the abstraction of the human mind, but for 1 week I felt that just like how we say the light spectrum, we are seeing a certain range of it, I felt that beyond my own sight there was other ways that I was present. And in order to accompany or align with that present, there had to be an inactivity in where I was. So, the human being in ancient times perceived reality to be a dream. In modern times, we talk about it as the simulation hypothesis, that what if reality was so advanced back in the day that this current moment is a simulation of that. This transcendental entrapment, from, I would say, since 2011, for me, and even in 2015, where I had experienced for a certain week, I would say the first duality, the first entrapment, was a sort of mind being caught in duality, meaning that life had to either be good or bad, right or wrong, or chaos and order as archetypes, like the person's trying to be good, the person's trying not to do bad things. It's a constant duality. It's like a wheel, or it's like the yin-yang symbol, where the person hasn't realized the yin and yang are in the same circle. It's one circle for both of them. So identifying with the dualism of reality is not focusing on the whole thing, pretty much, which leads to a sort of, let's say, a sort of transcendental entrapment. The human being is human design in energetic being. We look at the idea of energy as something that cannot be created or destroyed, what changes all the time. To the shaped individual, the only eternal quality of the visible world is change. That means everything changes except change. If a human being identifies with the change, you are forever transforming, or as ancient cultures would say, the transmigratory soul, as if this body is like a vehicle. We enter this vehicle, or an Iron Man suit. We enter this elemental suit. We navigate through it for some time, and then we exit the elemental soup and the elemental soup, and we enter another, and it's like forever this process of endless enlightenment through forms. There's a quote I want to share. Actually, I should have probably done this at the beginning. I found this list of quotes that are very important. So I'll start from, I'll just go into this quote tunnel quickly, guys, and then I'll make the talk easier. Swami Sivananda says, always do good to others, be selfless, mentally remove everything and be free. This is divine life. This is the direct way to moksha or salvation. And then we have Rajneesh. He says, mind dissolves only when you don't choose, and when there is no mind, you are for the first time in your crystal clarity. For the first time in your original freshness, for the first time your real face is encountered. Mind is not there, the divider. Now existence appears as one. Mind has dropped. The barrier between you and existence is no more. Now you can look at existence with no mind. This is how a sage is born. With the mind, the world. With no mind, freedom, moksha, nirvana. Cessation of the mind is cessation of the world. So if an individual is endlessly changing in a dualistic framework, and when it's changing in that dualistic framework, it's considering that it is the mind's doing, then when the mind attains a stillness or a lack of identification with what's going on, as if you are watching a film, you're not in the film, then like the duality of the mind starts being watched. The watcher can't be defined by duality. If you think in the sense that when we look at lesser species, it's as if they're all in the present. It's as if they're all animals are enlightened. All lesser animals, animal species. It's as if they don't fear they don't get depression from their past, and they don't get anxiety from their future. In the presence, let's say like a gazelle sees a lion, sure, it's going to get some sort of signal in that moment, but animals are not playing with dualistic sub-notions of a singular reality. They are just present. You see, this is the most ancient component to our intelligence. That means we think we are human beings. No, we were being. Then the human emerged. That means the environment was our mind. Something allowed this creature to separate from the environment. So for the first time inside the mind of nature arose the mind of man. The mind of man had to separate itself from nature to be man. But as man suffers in reality through an endless dualistic paradigm, man returns to nature, and that's where levels of meaninglessness come in. So I would say that if we say duality is the trap or a simulation, it's the illusion, there are two ways to get out of duality. We either go towards the singular void, or we go towards the infinite void. And the notion of the singular and the infinite, these are like gateways. They're like portals. If we take the path of the singular void, which the ancients did, in ancient times the yogi was like, am I in a world of illusion right now? Okay, maybe I'm going to sit down here for a while. Through the singular void, there is no self. It's as if we are going from dualistic human to singular being. I would say the path of the infinite void, it's as if we are going from the dualistic being to the infinite human. Ultimately, the void is there as one realizes whether reality becomes a sort of oneness or an incomprehensible, immeasurable, undualistically containable reality. Eventually it comes to the void. So it's as if we are sandwiched. The dualistic entity, the idea of the individual, is sandwiched between the infinite and the singular. And the infinite and the singular are sandwiched between void and void. The moment a person realizes that their being is the presence of the universal sector, the suffering of the dualistic body doesn't go away. The person zooms out and sees such a bigger picture, direct experiential nature to the moment, that the duality cannot touch you. It's another way of saying the person has been thinking they have been suffering, or they've been thinking that they have been the enjoyer, and suddenly they realize, wait a minute, it's an unknown attention mobilized through the elements. So, entrapment means we have to find where the definition of the trap is arising from. It's another way of saying that a person is freaking out that they're in an illusion, they're in some sort of trap, and then they're like, wait a minute, where does the trap come from? And then they realize that the illusion has to be projected from truth. That means there is no such thing as an illusion alone. There is no such thing as a simulation alone. There is, I wouldn't say reality, but there is the real. And the real transcends all thoughts, all notions. There's a notion in cognitive behavioral psychology where they say thoughts lead to feelings, emotions, and emotions lead to actions, and actions shape the conditions where the whole thing is being seen. If thoughts of duality give us an emotional expressionism through an individual actor, therefore the individual is simultaneously being a thought. I shouldn't say a thought, but is considering an ego to the nature of self. And this is one of the most fascinating things about human psychology, that we all, even though we see each other as human beings, we see each other as physical embodiments, we see each other as objects, but what is moving the object is not an object. This is why even in modern culture, whether it's men or women, it's like you hear, don't objectify me, don't objectify and so the notion is that if the person is not an object, what are they? And if the subject of self is caught in duality, and duality is a trap, what is there? That means from what am I, it goes to what is there. And that presence is so beyond a character in a story that it's as if halfway as the character is living in samsara. As the person is like, wait a minute, did I open my eyes to a world where invisible forces are shaping the visible, and this show has been going on for a long time? It's as if the actor on stage suddenly realizes it's acting. That is the nature of how mind dissolves into presence. Presence moves towards the attributeless. The attributeless is where the soul resides. For the ownership of eyes are the shadow of manifestation. The light behind the shadow is not an object or a subject, it watches, it witnesses them. And so the boundary of it is strange, because our awareness is like the glow of a candle, and the sky doesn't have an edge. So it's as if the person's like, wait a minute, where's the edge of this awareness of my being? Is the edge of the awareness of my being just how far my senses allow? Or is it how all the senses are providing for a new state of reception? Or it's another way of saying that when a musician plays a bunch of singular notes, in sequence and at the same time, it becomes something next level. But if the musician just goes one note, then the music is different. Something that I've shared in the talks before, and I share it often simply because it's one of the mysteries of my life. And it's one of those mysteries where the content came from the inner realms. So what I mean by that is that a person can see a known event in front of their eyes and an unknown event in front of their eyes, and they can also notice an unknown event behind their eyes and a known event behind their eyes. So if a person remembers their past, that's like a known event behind their eyes. If a person pays attention to whatever's in front of them in the conscious waking state, that's like a known event in front of the eyes, But to realize that the unknown events in front of your eyes and the unknown events behind your eyes are all the presence of the collective unconscious, it's as if there is no individual enlightenment. There isn't a person becoming truth. It's that truth was here, and the personality remembers beyond how it is held. You see, it's like we are moving to an era it's 2021 now. We're moving to an era where I would say it's post Buddhahood. The notion of the Buddha was individual enlightenment. We are constantly, as a species, going towards situations where the individual, how would I say it? It's as if the collective is inevitable. Collectivism will enter reality. But how it will enter, it's like there's different theories on that. There's a quote I remember from Rumi. He says, "You're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in the drop." And there's a quote from Kabir. He says, "Many people know that the drop merges into the ocean, but few know that the ocean also merges into the drop." It is not just individual intelligence that walks towards truth. Collective intelligence is also a walk towards truth. the mind is samsara. And the concept of karma pertains to it in the sense that if what we are experiencing now is how we have caused ourselves so far, that means if a person suffers and they wonder about whose responsibility is the management of their own suffering, they will inevitably come to the conclusion that they are the cause of wherever they are, just like how a person moves themselves. The self that has moved notices it is the mover. And this is very hard because in the outer realms, there is no sense of interdependence with reality. But to realize that you are moving, and that if the concept of cause and effect, there's karma, it means that only you can cause your freedom, rather than being under the effect of a cultural program, a dualistic program that doesn't see you. You know, as a person gets closer, or the candle's wax is melting. I believe there was this interesting quote from Manly P. Hall where he said that when one gets close to death, a very profound spiritual power arises within the being. I would say it's as if like the drop and ocean are getting closer and closer. I have the Shri Bhagavad Gita here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And there's a page of it that I've selected. And the Bhagavad Gita is this ancient text authored by Rishi Vyasa, where pretty much God meets this archer. And the archer's name is Arjuna. And so this part I want to read for the audience. Arjuna, he who with his mind disciplined through yoga. Yoga means union. Think of it. He says, Arjuna, he who with his mind disciplined through yoga in the form of practice of meditation and thinking of nothing else, is constantly engaged in contemplation of God, attains the supremely effulgent divine Purusha. This means, it's another way of saying like people back in the day thought there's individual souls. I would say it's as if there is one world soul, one field. And then there is endless minds. And the mind identifies with matter. And these minds have endless bodies. And if we live a materialistic life, it's as if we are the leaf of the tree that's connected to the branch of the tree. The leaf will fall as the seasons pass. But if we identify as the branch, some people live as minds here. You know, back in the day, as just our lesser evolutionary form, we were just moving around. Just instinct was there. There was, you can say, no sideline of intuition. And you know, it's honestly the unthinkable. This is why I could totally see that, you know, the theistic mind and the atheistic mind are both shocked. because oneness has no secondary ideal, you cannot even worship truth. You can worship an idea of truth, but you cannot worship truth, because truth is truth. There is nothing else. There's another part to this passage in Bhagavad Gita. I'll read it. It says, "He who departs from the body, thinking of me alone, even at the time of death," me is capitalized here in this book I'm reading, "attains my state. There is no doubt about it. Arjuna, thinking of whatever entity, as one leaves the body at the time of death, that and that alone one attains, being ever absorbed in its thought. Therefore, Arjuna, think of me at all times and fight. With mind and reason thus set on me, you will doubtless come to me." And then it reaches the point where I read earlier. It says, "Arjuna, he who with his mind disciplined through yoga in the form of practice of meditation and thinking of nothing else, is constantly engaged in contemplation of God, attains the supremely effulgent divine Purusha. He who contemplates on the all-knowing, ageless being, the ruler of all, subtler than the subtle, the universal sustainer, possessing a form beyond human conception, effulgent like the sun and far beyond the darkness of ignorance, having by the power of yoga firmly held the life breath in the space between the two eyebrows even at the time of death, and then contemplating on God with a steadfast mind full of devotion, he reaches verily that supreme divine Purusha." So Purusha, guys, maybe some people don't know this. Purusha and Prakriti are like the two components of reality in Vedic thought, where they're pretty much like, all right, there's matter and there's space. Now, space that can notice itself, we call that consciousness. Purusha. So when he says, when in this book it's like God is telling this archer, hey man, if you're going to transition out of here, if your attention is not on the all-encompassing, the all-present, the omni, the presence of the universe, you will animate as a sub-part of it. Just like, again, it's like, will your eyes open as the leaf of the tree? Will your eyes open as the branch of the tree? Will your eyes open as the trunk of the tree, which is like the oneness? And will your eyes open through the soil that is beyond the unknown? That means to be conscious of the known is one thing. But to be conscious of the unknown means there is no one anymore to be conscious. That means it's like a human being training itself in life to not just be content with known phenomenology and noumenology, but also with unknown phenomenology and noumenology. The most hilarious thing is that every time human beings have used the idea of God, God is not an idea. It is the unconditional. That is the best word for the word God, I would say. In a secular context, the unconditional would be the closest thing to the ideal of God. And so if the entrapment, if we say that samsara is a dream, and the dream is not the ultimate reality, from the conditional, upon noticing the unconditional, that is, which is permanent, when the moment realizes it is simultaneously being the change of all that is. A free mind is no longer a mind. A free body is no longer a body. And a free soul is no longer a soul. The conditions evaporate. And that which remains, I have termed it in other talks, empty seeing. It is sight. Unconditional sight. The presence beyond the personality that was here before we could be born. You know, just like we can have entrapments for our outer life, whether it's lack of resources, whether it's lack of survivability, whether it's lack of existential pleasantness. In our inner life, it's like one's greatest enemy is themselves. We even see it in shows, like the final boss is like the shadow self of the warrior. And the warrior cannot fight the shadow self because the shadow self has access to everything the warrior has. The only way you defeat the shadow self is you stop fighting with it. You accept the shadow. And then your head can turn. So in the inner life, the unconditional, attributeless observer of the conditional, changing, observed, this is the end of thought, the edge of this is where human thought goes truly beyond the language threshold. There is no longer a journey, it is being. So the human being becomes being, all being. At this point, there is no longer creaturehood. And maybe the sentence has never been said, but the future is not for a creature. Life is just a massive, a grand happening, something that is just happening. For how long do transcendental drones want to roam the space-time continuum? Eventually, one's eyes finish their journey. And so if the idea of self dies before the body, there is no one to die. It's like St. Francis of Assisi says, it is in dying to self that we're born to eternal life. You know, this is what I honestly feel. I'm not Christian, but being raised in a Christian culture, I would say this is what the idea of baptism to me feels like. You know, it's a second birth as a recognition of as a presence. That means it's like a birth beyond thought. Even in esoteric traditions, there's the concept of initiation. And I have thought about, the esoteric context, Theosophical societies for a long time, and how the logos responded to my own observance of it was that it is not a costume game. It is not like a passcode where the person just behaviorally does some things and they attain. Attainment arises through observance of one's nature. It's as if, I don't want to say we're all powerful beings, but it's as if the power source of beinghood is always there. It's in our identification with phenomena that power divides and breaks down. So the more we're trying to be a specific person seeking power, the less we actually can realize the power was in the room before we were. You know, this is the whole notion of divinity. Divinity is not like you bake a cake, you put some ingredients, say some things, and it's like yay, divinity. No, I would tell you, divinity is the teacher. And man's mind, the ego, is the disciple. So it's as if the idea of self is the disciple of one singular universal event. As we attain calmness, and those who are dabbling in insincere transcendental narratives, you must cultivate, rather than esoterica, you must cultivate esotericalmness. An acceptance that nature is the ultimate peace. And not that truth is nature. I would say truth is beyond nature. But it's that the world has nowhere else to happen. I would say that's a moksha trigger, when you realize that, wait a minute, the world is being the world, regardless of how man chooses to see the world. You know, it's like how Attar, the Sufi mystic from long ago, he says, the sea is the sea, regardless of the drop's philosophy. There's this Japanese saying, I don't remember it exactly, but I remember the idea of it, where they say, be careful what you say to yourself, because there's a warrior within that is being lessened by it, that is being taught by it. And so even if we take the ideas from cognitive behavioral psychology, the idea, the thought, the Iron Man suit you choose to step into suggests the karma accessible. And I feel there's a quality in human intelligence, just in the intelligence of an evolutionary being, that one of the triggers for evolution is boredom, at least for those who are conscious. That means it's as if the person has been living as a violent and cruel person, you're like, okay, for how long? Like, how many times do you want to see the cycle repeat? Or even if the person thinks they're being a good, like through a good archetype, it's like, how long does the person want to see the archetype repeat? And I would say it's a sense of responsibility to at first your individual self, and then you become responsible of your individualism as the universal self. And the universal self has no death. You know, when I say universal self, you could call it cosmic self, collective self, whatever you like, but I'm saying that it's like the whole thing can't die, but what's in the whole thing, like the yin-yang circle, the circle can't, there is no death for it, but inside the circle, the yin and yang take turns, you know, as if it's like the yogi, the sage, looked at the existence, the world's like, wait a minute, what is existence doing? Endlessly animating chaotic beings, ordered beings, chaotic beings, ordered beings, chaotic beings, ordered beings, superheroes, supervillains, superheroes, super. It's like, how long? In the outer realms, there's many things we can't change. But in the inner realms, change can happen instantly. A person could be functioning under the impression that they are weak. And the moment they experience their own strength, it's as if that past self doesn't exist anymore. As if the attention of the whole moment of being, the attention of one's presence, realizes it could have always moved differently. Because it's all movement. I mean, that's the thing about life, right? We wake up to live, right? If a person woke up and was like a statue, there would be nothing. It's like you can't say that person has lived. It's only in our movement, right? But eventually, after a very long time of movement, we change how we move, right? So the creature was four-limbed, like any person can put their palms on the ground and recognize that they're an evolutionary creature, you know. You can notice your own animalism. But then what happened to this creature? It stood up. It changed how it was moving. It didn't change per se how it was, like it had maybe the same body and it just stood on two legs, but it changed the manner of movement, right? So after a very long time, let's say from a transcendental narrative, I shouldn't say transcendental, but let's say from the Vedic standpoint, the person has moved in manifestation for a very long time, for eons. Now it's for kind of like our bodies stood up and our mind, the mind stood up into the mind, and now the mind is standing up into that which is beyond itself. And I would say the phases of it is that free will actually goes towards something similar to divine will, but then divine will stops being any sort of willingness because truth needs no other concept for itself. That means the action is the action. It's as if like whatever is happening here, if the person considers there to be truth, then it is. Like the I and the S are capitalized. It's such an interesting world we're alive in. There's literally an all-you-can-eat or all-you-can-consume information buffet. There's so many ways things are moving, and at the same time, everything has to be able to be to move. There has to be presence before the personality. Or let's say before we can even judge a robot's movements, like the inventor has to create a robot, you know. It's as if we are it's as if change has nowhere to go. It's like whatever brush strokes are made on the canvas is just there. And so the canvas for individual ideological truth is just space being. That means it's as if we are being space before we're being the human in this space. So once we function under the divine Purusha, the space, then being human is a part of our moment. In the beginning, I pointed to experiences I've had, like a very interesting experience I had. I think it was 2013, 12, I don't know. But one day in the morning, I have this dream, and I'm in a sleep paralysis. So what that means, it's like it's the morning, and I enter consciousness from deep sleep, and I'm just in my bed. My body is asleep, but I'm awake. And I remember I hear this word in my dream state, this word called Lida. And when I say this word instantly, there's a projection. And in that projection, I get a glimpse of this giant stone wall in space where there is an inverted triangular cave. This is why the imagery of the inverted triangle is so fascinating to me. And during that experience, there was a sense of restriction. Now, I find myself back in the room, and I wake up and I sit to the side of my bed, and I have my hands on my head as if what just happened, and I felt like as if my soul took a shower, you know. But there was a sense of restriction, that it's as if this sense of self has a sort of ranged freedom, but the senses of self that transition beyond duality. As if think of it this way, that there is no one person, there is 4 dimensions of selfhood. One dimension of selfhood is like the 0 dimension. There is nothing, no self. It's just being purely being. Then there is a dimension of self which is the singular. The singular self is in some sense endless animations of manifestation, endless, as if the person's doesn't have one body. The person is like infinite bodies in space. I shouldn't say infinite bodies, excuse me. Just think of it as just a singular self. Let me say it that way. Like an individual self, like right now, like the ego. Let me say it that way. So there is the void, and then there's the void self, and then there's the individual self. Then we have the dualistic self, which is like the vehicle in the changing realm. That's where I'm giving this talk from a dualistic position. Because if it was any other state, first of all, there can't be a doer to speak, and at the same time, there is no need to speak the moment you go beyond duality, beyond the language threshold. And then there is the infinite self. The infinite self is very interesting because it is so different than how we are conditioned in dualistic thought. Right now, the person is thinking about their, you could say, the joy of their self or the suffering of their self, you know, of oneself, like the body, you know. But when you realize there's a way bigger phenomena of presence, of your own presence going on, then in some sense, the suffering of myself, the suffering, the joy of myself, it goes away. It's as if that becomes child's play. So from the age of Buddhahood, it goes to the age of Bodhisattvahood, where it's no longer individual joy, it's collective joy we seek. And this collective joy is not just like, you know, a bunch of people dancing for mystical truth. It's when the being can enjoy their moment as the universe happening, I would say. Beyond duality, there is no concept of entrapment. All entrapment goes away. Anybody who has the notion that this world is a prison, or a sort of simulatory prison, or if anybody has this notion that this world is a school of endless improvement, it's as if beyond that, the eyes are open. I'm going to read a few quotes. Swami Sivananda says the cause of bandha and moksha, bondage and liberation, is our own minds. If we think we are bound, we are bound. If we think we are liberated, we are liberated. It is only when we transcend the mind that we are free from all these troubles. Erwin Schrödinger says Vedanta teaches that consciousness is singular. All happenings are played out in one universal consciousness, and there is no multiplicity of selves. Rajneesh says sinners live in a sort of hell, and saints imagine themselves in a sort of heaven. And the sage, for him it is moksha. For him it is the absolute freedom. He is freed from all duality. The secret key and the only key is awareness. That means, guys, we're reaching a point where there is no more teacher. There is no guru anymore. Like, I shouldn't say there is no more guru. There is no attachment to something other than what you have been being this whole time. This may be a strange thing to say, but it's as if like the born self is noticing the unborn self, which is another way of saying the whole world. I was just thinking, it's like at the same time that I'm giving these talks, because the universe is happening at the same time, it's as if like I could choose any idea, choose to see myself as an idea speaking, but it's like the universe is happening. There's an inseparability of individualism and collectivism. It's as if the language we use currently, or the language I'm using to speak, this is a language that is in the eyes, and then there is a language that is the language of the eyes, how the eyes move, rather than what something moves in your sight. It's like how your sight moves in the phenomenon. A man by the name of Dada Bhagawan says, one binds the worldly life with bad thoughts. One binds the worldly life with good thoughts. With the absence of thoughts of vichar, there is moksha, liberation. Dada Bhagawan says, where are you looking for samadhi? Which is an enlightened blissful state. He says, where are you looking for samadhi? You just come into your original self-form of the soul. Final liberation and samadhi are the natural qualities of the soul. You know, it's honestly like, I would say, if existing in a changing world as a temporary being, like, is like a riddle. And at the same time, I mean, I gotta say, like, think of it. We are in a world so big and so vast, but we are designed to just experience it for such a short time. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's as if, why does the world exist in such a vast way? That means it's like we have committed the error. You know how it was Galileo who came and said to the clergy at the time, the Inquisition at the time, he said that Earth is orbiting around the sun. And so the religious notions at the time had this view that no, we're the center of the universe. I feel that's the hilarious thing, that we are still making the human idea the center of the universe, but which goes beyond the human idea. Like, being human is important. It's kind of like it's important how attention is dressed, but at the same time, if the truth of reality transcends the human idea, it's as if it's like as us being part of the small, the micro, and the macro. All that the micro can do in order to experience the truth of the macro is to abide with it. Or what did Jack do, like in the Jack and the Beanstalk story? When he noticed the macro, when he noticed the giant opportunity, he, in some sense, the micro climbs the macro. You know, the other day I went by, there's a very nice lake beside my place. I went and sat down, you know, in some part of nature. When I go for walks in nature, in my inner realms, I already see myself sitting somewhere, and I just go sit there. And when I go sit, I just like how you put like a cup of tea on the table, you know, and you just let go of it. It's like in a sort of, at least my experience of meditation is, I just go in a moment and I just sit, as if like in a way where the body's not moving anymore. The body's just there. You know, and I remember I saw on that lake, this is going to sound a bit hilarious, but like on that lake I saw a duck swimming on the surface of the lake, and the duck would constantly put its head in and out of the water, you know. And for a moment I felt every thought I have had, everything I have shared in these Mr. Within talks, it's like a duck on a pond. The pond is like the awareness, the content in the awareness, and it's just there being. So there is so much of this life that it's just being, and if a person cannot find contentment with being, they cannot see it. You cannot access it. It's like that's a huge source of suffering, that it's like we are too focused on the human part of the word human being rather than the being. It's as if once you have contentment with unknown being, then the knowledge of the humanization is very easy. It just happens. It's like once it's like the person riding the horse into battle, like imagine cavalry, like that. It's like there is such trust on with the horse that the person's not even thinking about how to ride the horse. They're thinking about what's there after, or where they're going, right? So we will get to a point as beings, I find, where living as a human being is not going to become difficult. Probably technology is going to assist us and make life really easy in the future. So it becomes in some sense, where we are riding our humanism towards. I find that beyond transcendental entrapment, there is just being, contentment with universal being. That is the only discipleless and teacherless state. It's as if a state of being transcends all esoteric thought, all metaphysical ideology. That regardless of what we do, reality is being, and the creature that is obsessed with doing something true, in some sense, it's like samsara continues. And the hilarious thing about being, enlightened being, is in some sense the being you can't do anything about it. Like, it's like, what can a person do about something that is just being there? That's the power of the presence. There is no touching truth. There is no attaining truth. There is remembering being it, though. It's kind of like Alan Watts says, imagine yourself going to sleep and never waking up. Then imagine yourself waking up having never gone to sleep. It's like eternity cannot cry or laugh, but the temporary can. Alright, one last passage from the Bhagavad Gita, and then I'll pilot this episode. I'll land this episode. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, but here it just by me is truth. Worship me and make obeisance to me, thus linking yourself with me entirely, depending on me, you shall come to me. And it says thus in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahman, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjuna ends the 9th chapter entitled The Yoga of Sovereign Science and the Sovereign Secret. All of this, guys, is just pointing to how truth is here first. And if the attention is on that, then there is no secondary. world cannot make mistakes. What's in the world can. And to itself, to the boundaries of itself. Experientially, if I was to say how I have felt a connection to a presence before my birth, the less a person does, the less they are a doer, the more things are just happening. It's as if right now, as I'm giving this talk, I don't have to think about the birds, for example, to chirp. Like I can hear birds chirping, you know? So it's as if it's something that just is happening. That's the power of nature. I would say the secret of nature. It needs no wielder. You know, it's like truth is not like a sword, you know, that can be held in a certain way, and the person's like, yo, I got truth. You know, I'm holding it right. It's just how a lot of reality, it's like the body of the universe. You know, it's as if we are a cell. Imagine the cells in like, you know, your body started their own theories, ideologies, campaigns towards truth. What can they do? You know, they self-simulate until they realize they're the simulation of a greater self. You know, if action is movement in duality, and duality is where the limitations of life are being pictured out of, your moment of being is your real guru, and it has been there from the beginning. When the eyes become the world, truth has nowhere to go. And you know, I was just thinking, when you look at animals in nature, they have the capacity to trust themselves. But to consciously be able to trust the awareness of a movement way beyond your own eyes, it's as if, what else can we do? You know, it's as if it's like existence is here to be trusted. Or how else can we exist, you know? So it's like I'm saying, you're in the idea of the human being, the human has to trust the being. The known human has to trust the unknown being. And once there's trust of the unknown being, then the known, or the notion of the known human can also be unknown. It's like the species transcended fear by remembering all that is. And I would say this is a point where I'll end the talk. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Namaste. Okay, there's a question before I end off. Michael says, is there a way to see pointers without a teacher? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that when the child is young, the child has no personality. The child is just being. Even if you see someone, even let's say there's a teacher, okay, let's say a person sees, like, they think there's an enlightened teacher, you can't see the teacher from the eyes of the teacher. So the student never actually sees the teacher as the teacher sees itself. You know, the student sees through their past memories a reflection of themselves, or a capable potential of themselves in the teacher. You know, it's not an easy thing to say, and especially in a culture where human beings are suffering through ideological loneliness. It's like I'm saying that we're here once in this physical format, in this physical embodiment of our lifetime, and a person can choose to see truth in others. But if the teacher is wise, if even if there is that teacher archetype, if the teacher is wise, the teacher makes the student realize, hey buddy, I'm a mirror. That means if the teacher is a mirror, then the student's, what is within the student is teaching itself. Because you can get attached to a personality of someone you don't know. You know, this has happened. You see that all over India and just a lot of mystical traditions. You know, people get attached to those who they think they are enlightened, and not realizing that they are waiting for something outside of themselves to permit them to realize something about them or their own self. You know, but we don't have time for that. You know. When you realize your presence is beyond personality, there can't even be an outer teacher. Like, that's the whole thing. There is no inner outer. It's just present. That means I'm telling you, forget teachers. There is just there is something here before I was born, before you were born, whoever's listening, before any of us were born. There is something being here. And it is experientially active beyond sensory dualism. It's honestly, when it comes to transcendence, it's honestly the game of selflessness and just selfishness. Like, what are the options? The person can infinitely upgrade. They infinitely upgrade, you know, they become an infinite being, or you become nothing. You go towards the singular void or the infinite void. And it's contentment, and at the same time, this world is way bigger than the voice of an individual can capture. So I'm saying that instead of thinking that truth is set in stone in language, language is like the tip of the iceberg of a reality that could be way unknown and way beyond the language of meaning. So if there is a little, even if tiny percentage, that truth transcends language, even if the person feels they're entrapped, there is a state beyond identity with the trap. So it's like the person is being free, not because they're doing something necessarily, because they're realizing that which is free is being. And it's like there is pilots and advanced communicators, and the task of the pilot is to really take the attention of the individual entity to a realization that the whole thing is the meaning. How could it not be? So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Honestly.